Hey everyone, this is Alan Brochstein from New Cannabis Ventures, and I'm joined today by John Fowler, the CEO of Supreme. How's it going, John?
Very good, Alan. Always a pleasure. It's been too long.
For sure. So a lot going on this week. You and I were chatting before. You said it may be the most eventful week or two in LP in ACMPR history, and I concur. And it just keeps rolling out. We had another announcement last night about Terracin and Canopy, which I don't even know if I'm going to get to that one, but I wanted to check in with you. I'm checking in with a lot of the people in the industry to kind of get a sense of what all this means. And if we can, I want to start with the Canopy Growth Constellation deal. And just from as somebody in the industry, what is your view of how that changes things for the overall industry, if at all?
I think that deal is one, hats off to Canopy for getting it done. I'm sure that's been worked on for a year, if not two, so that's not a quick investment. What that does is a few things. I think one, it legitimizes the Canadian industry here. I think two, it demonstrates that there's upside to being a company that only operates in federally legal jurisdictions like Canopy and like Supreme. That was disclosed in some of Constellation's guidance. But I think most importantly, it shows that, a Fortune 500 company has done their diligence and said that investing in Canadian cannabis is safe. And I would assume that there's other investors, whether they're in the United States or elsewhere abroad, or maybe more conservative investors in Canada who can take a lot of comfort with that and potentially take a more deeper look at the opportunity that is Canadian cannabis.
I think you're right on that point. I was at a bar mitzvah, and all these people are coming up to me talking about it. My wife has been out, and people come up to her and say, hey, did your husband hear about that deal? She kind of chuckles because she keeps up with it. But definitely that last point's interesting. Do you think I know you guys are positioned differently from your peers because you're focused on the wholesale market, but for the people that are operating with a vertically integrated model with the customer acquisition, all that, how do you think it impacts them, if at all?
So I think this impacts anyone in the space equally, in that really, to me, the Constellation deal is about brand. So, yes, we do wholesale, but we still aspire to be a retail brand. The same way, arguably, Constellation is a wholesaler. For the vast majority of their sales, they generally don't own the retail point of sale. So for Supreme and for every other company, this is demonstrating that those outside investors that people have been wondering if they're there or not, really since the inception of the ACMPR, it shows that they are there. It shows that they're potentially willing to lay down big cash. I mean, the Constellation investment was essentially a $500 million investment, and it really just opens the horizons for new and exciting ways to grow the business and drive value through partnerships that don't have to be limited to other Canadian licensed producers, don't have to be limited to aspiring international opportunities, but literally can be with a Fortune 500 company, and I think that's pretty exciting.
And then do you sense, obviously a lot of capital flowed into Canopy or will if the warrants are exercised ultimately. And, we're starting to see maybe some pressure on some of the companies that aren't in the top tier and that aren't fully scaled up yet. Do you think that this move or the next thing that we'll talk about kind of forced the industry to think about more M&A activity or other types of partnerships?
So I think really what you always have to do when you're operating in any new industry or existing industry is understand where you're at in the development. So if you look at Supreme, we're a couple of years, really about 2 years behind Canopy, a year and a half or so behind Aurora when they really got going. When we came out and we got licensed in 2016, we made a decision that it was better for us to focus on cultivation where we felt we had a real strong competency than to try to compete in the retail medical market with patient acquisition costs, infrastructure, et cetera. So, we saw, hey, that first wave is done or is sunsetting. How can we be a bit of a different company? I'm surprised more haven't followed in our wake in that regard. What I am seeing is a lot of companies now, late-stage applicants who are really focused on different verticals, whether that's downstream products, research, distribution plays, things like that. And I think that's a sign of a smart entrepreneur who recognized that their 2013, 2014 business plan when they applied doesn't apply today in 2017 or 2018 moving forward. With respect to M&A, I think that as you get more differentiated businesses, the ability to do M&A increases, because to me, the value of the deal is not the short-term stock appreciation. If you're looking to run a long-term company, really what makes or breaks deals is the ability to integrate. And I think when you're putting together pieces that fit harmoniously, I think it's much easier to integrate, and it's much easier to make 1 + 1 = 3 and drive real value gains for all the investors.
Okay, that leads me kind of to the next topic, which is earlier this week we've seen some consolidation in the space, but it's always been friendly, but negotiated deals that come across as being friendly. And now we have a hostile situation, and I was just wondering your thoughts on the Aurora CanMed deal, and if you think, what you think of that.
So I think technically Aurora is still friendly with a large but I see one, as a corporate attorney, it's exciting to see that next level of capital markets activity. So, kudos to Aurora for being willing to take that step. But that's a good example. You have a company like CanniMed that has the longest track record of anyone in Canada, strong on the oils, downstream products, and research, strong on the medical side. I think they've even stated they don't have much of an interest or possibly even have an opposition to recreational. You put that together with Aurora, which I'm sure has strong plans for recreational. I think that's a great combination. For Supreme moving forward, if we're exploring M&A, we haven't done any to date, but we're always actively looking. We feel we're a great candidate to be an acquirer working with others, because we can take our cultivation expertise and we can look to bolt on different aspects of the business to make us stronger, whether that's oils, whether that's downstream products, whether that's other brands, things of that nature.
Got it. Okay, so do you think that the Aurora and CanniMed will come to fruition, or do you think that CanniMed will fend them off? Because clearly they're not interested, or it doesn't seem that they are.
I think that's a question for stock pickers. So, it's interesting to see what the market's suggesting they think will happen. But at the end of the day, I don't know enough of the inner workings of either companies to really know, the value of the deal. What I can say, I think that if that company does combine from an operational perspective, it's quite an interesting opportunity. But I think if CanniMed stays on its own with their opportunity to pick up New Strike, they're also gaining a lot of low-cost input. And I think it's important that we start to see the specialization in the market, right? Low-cost input, all the millions of square feet of greenhouse, is really great for making downstream products where the quality of the initial cannabis bud doesn't matter. So
right.
Oil, edibles, certain vape pens. I think you have to separate that from the market where the quality of the bud does matter, whether that's for the smoked market, which even in most U.S. states is still the largest single category and will be a large category in Canada due to the lack of other product types, at least early stage. And then also we have to remember the concentrate market in many ways is really an expression of the flower. So high-end flower makes some of the highest end concentrates versus sort of those extract oil products. So I think when you look at it that way, it makes sense for a company like CanniMed to pick up more input supply. For us, I think it's another sign of specialization. It's another sign of market maturity. And as a company that specialized early in premium dried cannabis, we're happy to see others following suit.
Okay, I have just one more quick question. We've seen kind of a change in the landscape. I think in the Aphria prospectus, they talked about the need to have physical capacity in distinct provinces is a go-to-market strategy, which I'm wondering how you think about that. Do you feel like you might be at a disadvantage in some provinces by only being in Ontario?
So I think it's too early to say. So certainly there is the history of alcohol regulation in Canada where generally there is preference given to the domestic producer in the given province or state. But at the same time, there are headwinds towards getting rid of those limitations in Canada for alcohol, having more free trade between the various provinces. So it's too early to say where it comes out. What I will say is we are in the province that has about 1/3 of all Canadians.
Right.
So to the extent we are excluded from other markets, the inverse is that we have a step up in the largest market in Canada. That potentially is the largest market in the world. And the reason I say that is the LCBO, so the state-run liquor retail here in Ontario, is one of the biggest alcohol retailers in the entire world. They have basically a 10 million person captive market. When you look forward at cannabis, there's every indication that that model is kept. The Ontario Cannabis Retail Corporation could well be one of the world's biggest retailers of cannabis. So if I've got to give up a little bit of access to PEI to get better access to Ontario, I can live with that. Or if we have an open playing field, I think we're well positioned as well.
Got it. Hey, it's always great to hear from you. Thank you so much, John.
Alan, thanks a lot. Always a pleasure.